Hi, so today I wanted to read some of a book, Brave New World. This is what we're reading in English right now, and I wanted to talk a little bit about Shakespeare. There is some Shakespeare quotes in Brave New World, and I the last chapter that I read, I had a conversion to Shakespeare because I used to hate Shakespeare pretty much all my life. That never changed. I didn't like it because it was in old speech that's hard to understand, and my reasoning was, why do they make us read every year? We have to read a different Shakespeare play. Why do they make us read something that is in the language that's hard to understand? That's not really a skill, understanding old English. And there are so many novels that have been published more recently that use our language. There's such an abundance of novels that have been published recently. Why are we reading something that is so old and is really, what's the word for, like, outdated? I'll look it up and maybe put it in the little caption if I can think of it. So Shakespeare. And I feel like that might be true to a degree. I feel like to a degree, I still believe that to a degree, part of the reason people like Shakespeare so much may be that they are clinging to the past and they don't want to give it up. So Shakespeare was an incredible playwright for his time. Incredible. And he wrote jokes that the people of the time found very funny. Now, when most people read his plays, they can't understand the jokes at first. You might have to reread it or look at some kind of commentary to understand. It definitely, I think, loses some of its power when it's hard to understand, but I lost my train of thought, sorry. What was I talking about? Shakespeare, words, old talk. Oh, yeah. So Shakespeare was great for his time, and just people don't want to accept the fact that everything eventually becomes outdated. Everything eventually, there are no priceless pictures and there are no timeless words. A little bit from a Jason Mraz song, A Beautiful Mess. But yeah, nothing is really timeless. Some things might be relatively extremely timeless, but eventually everything will lose its meaning over time, just depreciate as it becomes less and less relevant because society changes. Even something like a painting of a picture, eventually in like a million years, maybe humans look nothing like that, you know? But anyway, and people in general, I think, don't want to let go, don't want to admit, they want to be eternal, they want the books they read to be eternal, and they're not. But, okay, a little depth here, but, so, yeah. And my mom was really into Shakespeare, and I used to, like, make fun of her for it, because she was in Shakespeare troupe and everything, and I was like, Shakespeare is so stupid, but I feel like when I read this chapter of Brave New World, I kind of realized the point of Shakespeare. Not that there's a specific, like, intrinsic point, but I guess I found a point of it for myself. I found a purpose of reading Shakespeare. I can't really explain like why this book made me see Shakespeare in a different way, but I wanted to read a little bit of it from the Shakespeare section. I actually was gonna read a lot of different sections of Brave New World, because I really like that book too, but I wanted to read like everything, so I just decided to go with this part. I'm just gonna read a few pages. I don't know if this is legal or not. It probably, I don't know. I tried to look it up and it was kind of ambiguous, but in retrospect, I think before I looked it up, I already knew that I was going to do this no matter what the legal status was. So I was kind of just fooling myself by looking it up. I'm just gonna read it. But, yeah. Okay, reading. Sorry I lose my train of thought so much. Okay, okay. What do you think of them? He asked when he had done. The savage shook his head. Listen to this, was his answer. And unlocking the drawer in which he kept his mouse-eaten book, he opened and read. Let the bird of loudest lay on the sole Arabian tree, herald sad and trumpet be. Helmholtz listened with a growing excitement. At sole Arabian tree he started. At thou shrieking harbinger he smiled with sudden pleasure. At every fowl of tyrant wing the blood rushed up into his cheeks, but at defunctive music he turned pale and trembled with an unprecedented emotion. The savage read on. Property was thus appalled that the self was not the same, single nature's double name, neither two nor one was called. Reason in itself confounded, saw division grow together. Orgy porgy, said Bernard, interrupting the reading with a loud, unpleasant laugh. It's just a solidary service hymn. He was revenging himself on his two friends for liking one another more than they liked him. In the course of their next two or three meetings, he frequently repeated this little act of vengeance. It was simple, and since both Helmholtz and the savage were dreadfully pained by the shattering and defilement of a favorite poetic crystal, extremely effective. In the end, Helmholtz threatened to kick him out of the room if he dared to interrupt again. Yet, strangely enough, the next interruption, the most disgraceful of all, came from Helmholtz himself. The savage was reading Romeo and Juliet aloud, reading, for all the time he was seeing himself as Romeo and Lenina as Juliet, with an intense and quivering passion. Helmholtz had listened to the scene of the lovers' first meeting with a puzzled interest. The scene in the orchard had delighted him with its poetry, but the sentiments expressed had made him smile. Getting into such a state about having a girl, it seemed rather ridiculous. But, taken detail by detail, what a superb piece of emotional engineering. That old fellow, he said, he makes our best propaganda technicians look absolutely silly. The savage smiled triumphantly and resumed his reading. All went tolerably well until, in the last scene of the third act, Capulet and Lady Capulet began to bully Juliet to marry Paris. Helmholtz had been restless throughout the entire scene, but when, pathetically mimed by the savage, Juliet cried out, Is there no pity sitting in the clouds that sees into the bottom of my grief? O sweet my mother, cast me not away, delay this marriage for a month, a week, or if you do not, make the bridal bed in that dim monument where Tybalt lies. When Juliet said this, Helmholtz broke out in an explosion of uncontrollable guffawing. The mother and father, grotesque obscenity, forcing the daughter to have someone she didn't want, and the idiotic girl not saying that she was having someone else whom, for the moment at any rate, she preferred. In its smutty absurdity, the situation was irresistibly comical. He had managed, with a heroic effort, to hold down the mounting pressure of his hilarity, but sweet mother, in the savage's tremulous tone of anguish, was the reference to Tybalt's lying dead, but evidently uncremated and wasted his phosphorus on a dim monument, were too much for him. He laughed and laughed till the tears streamed down his face, quenchlessly laughed while, pale with a sense of outrage, the savage looked at him over the top of his book, and then, as the laughter still continued, closed it indignantly, got up, and, with the gesture of one who removes his pearl from before swine, locked it away in his drawer. "And yet," said Helmholtz when, after recovering breath enough to apologize, he had mollified the savage into listening to his explanations, "I know quite well that one needs ridiculous, mad situations like that. One can't write really well about anything else. Why was that old fellow such a marvelous propaganda technician? Because he had so many insane, excruciating things to get excited about. You've got to be hurt and upset, otherwise you can't think of the really good, penetrating, X-rayish phrases. But mothers and fathers," he shook his head, "you can't expect me to keep a straight face about fathers and mothers. And who's going to get excited about a boy having a girl or not having her?" The savage winced, but Helmholtz, who was staring pensively at the floor, saw nothing. "No," he concluded with a sigh, "it won't do. We need some other kind of madness and violence. But what? What? Where can one find it?" He was silent, then, shaking his head, "I don't know," he said at last. "I don't know." So that was a little bit of that. So I don't really want to try to explain, what it kind of meant to me, because I don't know, that's like delving into my unconscious, and that gets into a lot of stuff. But I hope you liked the reading, and I think possibly that moment when Shakespeare converts you could actually be a thing, because I think it's natural to be kind of disdainful of something that is written in such old language, but I think that actually a lot of like high schoolers, as they get older, not all of them definitely, but a lot of them learn to appreciate Shakespeare, and maybe that moment comes for everyone, I don't know. And I'm not saying he's my greatest favorite writer, but I don't know, I kind of saw something in it that I'd never seen before, and I wanted to share that. Okay, bye.